Hi, my name is Moshe. Today we're going to talk about Menachem Begin. He was a Zionist leader. He was a fighter in the Irgun. He was overall extremely important person in the creation of Israel. So let's get started. Menachem Begin was the successor of someone, as you probably know, named Zev Jabotinsky. Zev Jabotinsky, let's just talk about him for a second. One quick thing that's important: he didn't get along so well with David Ben Gurion. They both had their own visions of how to create the country, and that caused little problems along the way. We'll talk about that. After Jabotinsky died, um, Begin took over the control of both the revisionist party, which was the revisionist Zionism, which was the political party that Jabotinsky started, and the Irgun, which was an underground militia that helped create the state of Israel. Now, as we said, Jabotinsky was not going along so well with Ben Gurion, which led to Begin not going well with him, and it was crazy because they were complete opposites. While Begin was a right wing religious, and his style was suit and tie, Ben Gurion was left wing socialist and secular, along with t-shirt and shorts. Very, very opposite. At the beginning of World War II, the British stopped letting in immigrants, Jewish immigrants, into the land, which created a rift between the two underground militias, while the Haganah, led by David Ben Gurion, wanted to cooperate with the British. On the other hand, there was the Irgun under Menachem Begin, who wanted to fight against them. They both disagreed strongly on how to deal with the British, and along the way, this caused a lot of problems. For example, from November 1944 to February 1945, it was known as the hunting period, where Haganah fighters would capture and bring into the British Irgun fighters, and they know full well that they were sending them to death because the Brits didn't really like when people fought up against them, and they kind of didn't didn't treat those people so well. So that happened for a few months, and then at the end of it, during the entire time, Begin told his men to not fight against the Haganah people because he did not want to start a civil war, and he should not. He basically did not want Jews to fight against Jews, and he was stuck with this throughout many different times in his life. He also believed that if he didn't fight back, at some point the Haganah and David Ben Gurion would realize that the British weren't just going to hand over the land just easily, and they would join forces with the Irgun, and they would all together fight the Brits. At the end of World War II, this did happen for a short period of time, where both the Haganah and the Irgun joined forces together to blow up the uh, British headquarters, which was in the King David Hotel, which is a whole story of its own, which we'll talk about at some point. And it was a short period of time because it didn't go so well. The British very much did not like when people blew up their headquarters, and they wanted to get the people who did it. So Ben Gurion put out a statement saying that most of it happened because of the Irgun, and that caused for Menachem Begin to be the number one terrorist in that area, and to have bounty, dead or alive, on his head, which, hey, it's an accomplishment of its own, but that created even more of a rift between the two of them. At some point, there was the ship called Helena, which was a ship carrying 940 Irgun members and a whole bunch of weapons, which just happened after the creation of the IDF, where everyone under Ben Gurion, basically the Haganah, became the IDF, and Menachem Begin said that the Irgun would join if he was able to be in control of his people. Now, when the Helena came to the shores of Tel Aviv, Begin wanted all the weapons to go to his men because they were loyal to him, and he could basically have the weapons that he brought. Now, Ben Gurion saw this as a threat, and he was worried that they were going to start a coup to take over the military, and he ordered his men to open fire on the ship. Now, obviously, going along with the trend, Menachem Begin told his people to not shoot, to not open fire, but because it was chaos of war, didn't work so well, and they ended up opening fire. At the end of this short battle, 13 Irgun members and 3 IDF soldiers, which were the Haganah, died in it, while the rest of the Irgun members were able to get off of the ship before it blew up with all the ammunition in it. This wasn't that great, and it caused a lot of problems later on, but skipping forward, they joined together and they became the IDF. While Ben Gurion became the prime minister, and at some point he retired with, after 9 times, the after 9 times of Menachem Begin trying to get the prime minister's office, he was successful in 1977. He became the prime minister of Israel, and one of his greatest accomplishments was the Camp David Accords. Not to be confused with the Camp David Summit, that's different. But the Camp David Accords was a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, which was the first time in history where uh, an Arab country agreed to call Israel a state and would create peace with Israel as a state. In return, Israel backed out of the Sinai Desert and gave them the land, which was also the first time that Israel had the peace for land situation, which has led us to a bunch of different problems, but that's a different story. Later on in his life, David Ben Gurion sent a letter to Menachem Begin saying that as I've gotten to know you as a person, I've gotten closer to you and learned who you are. And I just wish that that I would have been able to know you earlier on in our lives, because history would have been very different and a lot less conflict would have happened. So that was the life of Menachem Begin. As I said, he helped further the peace. He helped create the Israeli state, and he was overall a really powerful and really strong Zionist. Don't forget to subscribe. You can check out a bunch of our other videos. We've talked about important people. I'll see you in the next video.